going to go ahead and kick things off since we are at the 9 a.m. hour. And I want to be mindful of everybody's time, and that this is a half an hour coffee chat. And so at 9:30, if you guys have something else on your calendar, please feel free to be blessed and released. However, if the conversation is still going and you wish to stick around, feel free to do so. But with all that being said, my name is Toni Maxey. I'm the Director of Development at the Virginia Poverty Law Center. And I'm excited that all of us can be here this morning because I personally find Virginia's budget process very mysterious. And I recently heard somebody say that it's a moral document. And so I want to ensure that, Virginia's budget reflects the values that I hold. So how can I, as a personal citizen, help shape that, the way we spend our money? The last thing I will say is that we are recording this session. It will be up on VPLC's YouTube channel a little bit later today. And I'll send out a follow-up email with the link. But just know that your conversations or your questions will be recorded. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Christie Marra, who is our Director of Family Advocacy here at Virginia Poverty Law Center. And the last thing I'll say is I am going to mute everyone until Christie is finished, and then we'll unmute.
Well, thank you, Toni, and good morning, everyone. And just Toni may not have had enough coffee today because I was the family law attorney 10, maybe not quite 10, maybe 7 years ago. But I've really been, as many of you know, focused on housing law and housing policy issues for the past decade. And I've got to say, looking around this group, I'm a little intimidated. I'm not sure because I see people who have far more savvy and knowledge about this than I do. And I'm looking at you, Becky, first and foremost. But yeah, Helen, you too. You too. And I'm probably missing a couple of other people who have some great experience at the legislature. So please jump in. And of course, Jay, but Jay's gonna, as usual, Jay's gonna tell me when I mess up. So but yes, I mean, I know that Toni and I and Jay, we all really want to make sure that we give you enough information this morning to enable you to get involved in the budget process. And so I will talk a little bit about the structure of how things work or don't work, depending on the year and depending on what your issue is. But I want to emphasize this concept of the budget as a moral document, because I took a few minutes to really think about what that means. And it really is about priorities. And there's nothing that touches our individual morals or collective morals more than having to prioritize what we spend our money on, right? We do it as individuals, we do it as households, we do it in our organizations, and the legislature does it for all of us. And so having our voices, all of your voices as part of that process is so critical. And we are going to talk, after I kind of go through some nuts and bolts of the process, I do want to highlight some of our big budget asks for this coming General Assembly session. And I know Jay's going to jump in at various points, but especially then, because I'm sure I'm going to talk about the housing asks, and Jay has some other things he'll add to that. But just to take a few minutes to talk about the process. The budget is, it's a lot like the Wizard of Oz, right? We don't see the man behind the curtain. We don't see the women behind the curtain. We get to hear what we don't even get to hear what they're thinking, come to think of it. And what I mean by that is the entire budget process is about us as citizens expressing our priorities to the legislature. They sometimes ask questions. They never make comments other than to say, It's going to be tough this year. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough every year. It doesn't matter how big a surplus we have. It doesn't matter if we have a deficit. They always tell you there's not enough money. It's going to be tough. And for a woman who really likes to spend, it's heartbreaking to hear that in any realm, but especially when we're talking about things as important as they're debating, right? So let me talk a little bit again about how this all starts. So the budget will begin, and this year is a particularly step-heavy year, if you will, in December, when the governor presents his budget to the money committee, Senate Finance, House Appropriations. This is a budget, coming on a budget year, so it's the 2-year budget. It is Governor Northam's last budget in which he gets to really highlight what his priorities are. And then the new governor, who's elected in November, will get to decide if he agrees with Governor Northam's priorities, where he disagrees, what he wants to add, what he wants to subtract, and then it will go to the legislature, or actually those amendments will go to the legislature. Members of the General Assembly will also propose their requested changes as amendments, and there will be opportunities to testify. But again, no public votes are taken on anything. There are questions asked, but very, in my experience, very little actually said by the legislators in public about what their priorities are. Everything is held extremely close to the vest until Becky or Helen, jump in if you can remember exactly when Budget Sunday is. I think it's somewhere in the middle of the session, when the 2 committees I mentioned come out with their proposed budgets, right? And then those changes, the way that they have changed the budgets, go up through the individual chambers, and then they cross over to the other chambers, and each side rejects the other side's budget, and it all comes down at the end to, I want to say, altogether 13, 14 people. Again, Helen and Becky jump in with the right number, but it's a group of senators, a group of delegates. They are the conferees. They get together and hash it out. All of it behind closed doors. So what can you do? Well, there are public hearings in January throughout the state. I believe they normally have 4 of them, and this is where I might get this wrong, but I believe it's normally Richmond, Tidewater, somewhere in Southwest Virginia, and somewhere in Northern Virginia. Becky says yes, thank you. And so, you can get the dates. We'd be happy. You can contact me or Jay or Tony. We'd be happy to give you the dates. Those are really great opportunities to for you to voice what your priorities are as a citizen. And those budget hearings do make a difference. And so people are listening, the committee members are listening, the committee members are looking. If you get 25 people in that room standing up and saying, we need more money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, they will remember that. After that, again, it's largely, still opportunities to testify in committee, but more difficult, I think, for folks who are not living in Richmond. Throughout the session, there are opportunities to contact the folks on the committees as well as your own legislators to talk about what your budget priorities are. We will work with you. We will let you know the specifics. We will let you know which of our priorities get into Governor Northam's budget, which of the priorities are in the new governor's amendments, which priorities are in amendments offered by different legislators. And so we'll also give you ways to help with that. Some of you are going to be living in districts. There are 2 committees. There's the House Appropriations Committee, and there is the Senate Finance Committee. Although, if you want to think about it, that committee of conference that we talked about, that Jay pointed out is always a different number. But that committee, that small group of senators and delegates that get together to try to reconcile the two different chambers' budgets at the end, you could think of that as a third committee. Does anybody have any questions so far? I have been talking nonstop for 10 minutes, and I would love to know what I've been unclear about and what questions you have.
Christy, this is Helen. I'll share. I've never really had to lobby on budget stuff, so I'm not the expert. Becky definitely is. But the most frustrating part for me about trying to follow the budget is it's not like you can just look up a bill, you know, on LIS and see kind of how it's fared through the process. It's like all of these giant documents that are on a separate website. And so to hear you say that VPLC is going to be checking in with us at the various stages about what the current state of the budget is incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Helen. It is incredibly confusing. I can tell you that even on Budget Sunday, when the relatively skinny committee reports come out, we pore over them for the rest of the day to make sure we understand what they're saying. Because yes, it's the information's on a separate website, but also you can't really understand one document without looking at least one other document, maybe two this year. And so, yeah, we will definitely be trying to distill things on our issues and get that out to you. What other questions are there about process?
So,
and
Christy, there was some questions in the chat about committees and you know, which committees in the Senate and the House. But the other thing to remember is there's a whole lot of subcommittees.
Yes.
And the subcommittees here at first, and then it goes to the full committee. I was going to try to. No, you can't really use, but there's, I think, according to what I have here, there's 7 subcommittees in the Senate and something like 12 in the House appropriations. So
yes, thank you, Jay. Yeah, and really the decisions are made in the subcommittee, unless they are really high profile items, which most of our things aren't considered to be that high profile. Even if they're high profile, the ultimate decisions are often made by the subcommittees. And so most of our priorities would be in, they have different names in the different committees, but it's something like economic development, etc. Our housing issues would go there. And then there's another one that might be called health and human resources. Health.
yes,
and, I'm looking to thank
both
you.
yes, in both the Senate and the House.
And most of the rest of our issues would go there because we are really focused on things like child welfare funding, foster care funding, public benefits funding, all of which would go, Medicaid, any other health care issues would all be there. So those are going to be the 2 committees, or really 4 committees, that we're really keeping a close eye on. Jay, can you think of any other subcommittee that we would be likely to be concerned about?
No, I think you've hit the main ones.
Okay. Okay. If there aren't any other questions about if there are questions about process, please ask, and I'm sure Jay or Becky will be happy to answer. No, I might know the answer. But if there aren't, I do want to talk a little bit about, yes, question.
What is the role in the budget of the budget and planning? They seem to come in with estimates that are sometimes very excessive, which it kills a very good bill, scares the legislators.
That is a great
In
question.
fact, I remember calling budget and finance one time, and they said, well, they agreed with me that it wasn't even reasonable, but they couldn't do anything about it because that's what the Department of Corrections gave them. So could you comment on that?
Absolutely, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. So many of the bills that get introduced that aren't part of the budget, they're just pieces of legislation. Many of them will get what we call a fiscal impact statement. Anyone in the legislature can ask for a fiscal impact statement. Often they are just automatically sent for a fiscal impact statement, and the Department of Planning and Budget reaches out to, for example, I'm trying to think of one this year that I'm working on that might have a fit. Well, there's some that we know, but for example, legislation that says the state's going to create a risk management fund for landlords, so that landlords who are renting to people with vouchers they won't be able to request security deposits. They'll have to get money out of the fund. So if we had that as a piece of legislation to go into the Virginia Residential Landlord Tenant Act, it would absolutely get a fiscal impact. They would probably send that to the Department of Housing and Community Development to determine the fiscal impact. And then what would happen is Eric Johnson, who is the head of DHCD, and his staff would look at it and analyze it and figure out what they would need. How much money would they estimate they would need to pay out to landlords? How many new staff would they need to administer that fund? And then that fiscal impact statement would be attached to the bill. And if the legislator who introduced that bill hadn't also introduced a budget amendment to fund the bill, that bill would be dead, probably, as you point out, John. I mean, gone. So one really important part.
I would say though, Christie, more and more you see people sometimes challenging the fiscal impact statements.
Right.
And be aware that can be done. And I think it's fair to say sometimes the agency that gets the request doesn't want to do whatever is being suggested, and sometimes just puts way too much money on it.
Yeah.
So it's worth sometimes challenging that. And obviously, it's not you; it's the legislators that are going to have to do that.
Well, that's a great point, Jay. And I will say, years ago, we were working on something related to foster care, and we looked at the fiscal impact statement and we just said, this is just wrong. And we poured over it and we recalculated it, and we went back to the Department of Social Services and said, look, don't you think this is more reasonable? And Social Services.
Can you comment on what are some of the ways that you can challenge it? Some guidance in that area?
Sure. So I think that the most aggressive way you can challenge it, and I have never done this, but maybe Jay or Becky have, is to actually is it JLARC who can, if you get a legislator to request, is it JLARC that can do a second fiscal impact analysis? I think I'm remembering that Jill Henkin did that one year. But the less, I'll say aggressive, less ambitious way to challenge it is to do what I've done in the past, which is to, get the data from whatever state agency provided it, and run the numbers and talk to the people at that state agency and convince them that they were wrong, basically. And then that's not enough, because then you have to make sure that they tell the people on the money committees that they were wrong and adjust their analysis. And even then, once that official fiscal, then what you want to really try to do is get the folks at DPB to issue a revised fiscal impact statement. And they will do that. I have seen that on many occasions. Without that official revised fiscal impact statement, which sometimes you don't have time to get, you're unlikely to be persuasive, even if you have somebody from the state agency saying, oops, we were wrong. You can try it, but it's hard. Tony.
Before we get too further into additional questions, just a clarification for one of our attendees. Back when we were talking about, Christie, the committees that ultimately hash out the budget, I think you said there were two. However, there was some confusion as to what exactly those two are. Is it Senate Finance and House Appropriations?
Yes,
Okay.
although they've renamed Senate Finance. So now I believe it's actually called Senate Finance and Appropriations.
Okay. And then also being mindful of our time,
Mhm.
if we can kind of pop up into what VPLC's budgetary
Mhm.
priorities might be and how we can move forward.
Sure, and I'm going to talk about our big budget priority in the housing arena, and then Jay may have a few other things. And if he doesn't, I'll talk about our secondary housing budget requests. But we have been working diligently since pretty much all year, because we tried to slip it into the current budget. That was fun. We came up with it in the middle of session and tried to slip it into the Senate budget, and we got some traction. It was pretty impressive. But we are working with a large group of stakeholders on something that we are calling the Reparative Home Ownership Pilot Project. It is designed to be reparations specifically for the harm done by racist housing policies and practices that were either developed and implemented in Virginia, or developed by the federal government and implemented in Virginia, or developed by Richmond and implemented in Richmond. We're working with Senator Hashmi and Delegate Bourne right now as our champions for this. And it will be, as of now, a pilot project in the Richmond metropolitan statistical area, though we've had a lot of interest in adding Charlottesville, and we're seeing if our patrons are interested in doing that. So in a nutshell, the Reparative Homeownership Program is a very robust down payment assistance program for people and the descendants of people who were denied home ownership or lost, I shouldn't say lost, or whose homes that they owned were taken by eminent domain for things like, because of things like urban renewal, highway construction, certainly, redlining, and more recently, people who lost homes to foreclosure during the subprime mortgage crisis. And we know, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much more about this because we only have 8 minutes, but we are looking at a program that would cost approximately $20 million for the biennium. And now it would serve approximately 200 home buyers, which sounds like a low number, but what I am going to continue to say to everyone is this is an important program. It has to be robust. I mean, when we are talking about reparations, we're talking about, the black-white home ownership gap growing since the Fair Housing Act was passed. We're talking about the immense difference in wealth between Black households and white households that is really born from all of these racist housing policies and practices of the past that have never been remedied, have never been addressed. So yeah, it's a lot of money and it's nowhere near enough. But it's a great place to start, and that will be our #1 budget issue in the housing arena. Jay, do you want to talk about anything, public benefits wise or anything like that?
I'll just say this real quickly. I pasted 2 links in the chat. One is the what we were asking for during the special session, and then the next one is how we did during the special session on our priorities. And I'll just tell you that we have priorities in housing, family and child welfare, food assistance, unemployment, broadband and utilities, and language access. And I think I'll just leave it at that because it would just take too long to go through all those. But take a look at those links.
So we do have 6 minutes. What questions do people have?
Christy, this is Helen again. Does the state have a bunch of extra money to dole out this year?
All depends on who you ask. So Helen's referring to the fact that under the American Rescue, 2 things. One, under the American Rescue Plan Act, lots of money came to the states, including Virginia. And there are some people who believe that some of that money is still left and it wasn't all spent or otherwise appropriated in the special session budget. The other piece of this is that some people are saying that there is a surplus and that that money, which is state money, general fund money, some people are saying that that hasn't all been spent or appropriated. I am some people, and I hope there are those in the legislature that are also some people, so I've heard different things on that. But I'm gonna.
Christie, one other thing I'd just like to add is whenever you hear somebody tell you that there is no money for that, that is the wrong thing to say. That is not true.
That's right.
Because there is always money for that. It's just a question of whether you want to spend it on this priority or that priority.
Exactly. Or
maybe that you need to raise more money, but that's never the right answer, that there is no money, because there is always money. If and that's sort of the whole theme of today's talk. I mean, if your morals and ethics lead you to believe that this thing should be done, then you find the money however you find it, and you should not accept that there is no money. And see, Tony, you asked for, there's a question in the chat. Who were the other stakeholders VPLC partnered up with for the homeowner pilot program?
Well, and we're still working on that. That's for this coming session. And so we're working with the Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We're working we anticipate working with New Virginia Majority. We are working with, we've met with the Virginia Association of Realtors. We've met with the Home Builders Association of Virginia. We've met with a variety of affordable housing providers. We've met with the Virginia Housing Alliance. I know I am forgetting other groups, but we definitely have a lot of interest from various sectors on this. And yes, Jay's exactly right about priorities.
And just maybe in closing, I would say that it is a difficult process to follow. It is kind of confusing, but you can definitely have input with your legislators. And particularly the ones who are on the finance committees are extremely important, have a lot of influence. And even on really pay attention to the subcommittees. There's the folks on the subcommittees have a lot of say. And if you can figure out where your priority fits in a subcommittee, you can talk to the members of that subcommittee, and it's amazing how much impact people can have.
Yeah. And Becky has a question or a comment before we.
I was just going to say one of the things that some of us watchers watch is the Department of Planning and Budget website. And you can go on that. It's dpp.virginiaspelledout.gov. But on that website, they have a date for the submission of decision briefs from the various executive branch agencies due to the DPB, and that's October 1. I thought it had been September 23rd, but it looks like it's October 1, which is really late to get information to the governor. But we had those little special sessions this year that kind of messed things up, the ARPA funds and whatever. However, those of us who are watching, like VPLC, some of the budget priorities, you can read the decision briefs that are coming from the agencies that look like they would be involved in what your priorities are. And you can see what they are telling the governor they would like to have in the budget. It's not bad place to start.
Becky, can you say the link again, and I'll put it in the chat, or you can put it in the chat.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, Christie, here's a question. They have to be your own legislators to be able to give your input?
No, not at all. You want to focus on two types of legislator. You want to focus on your own legislator because they're going to listen to you better than anybody else. But you also want to focus on the legislators on the money committees, on Senate Finance and Appropriations and House Appropriations. And if you see that one of your legislators is also on one of those money committees, then wow, yeah, that would be great for you to reach out to him or her then.
So Brian asked, when will the subcommittees be announced? 2 minutes before they meet. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. You know, and in the you can pretty much, in the Senate, it's probably whoever was on last year. But in the House, it's going to be a big change because people have come and go, and so there's going to be changes.
It'll be a change. We don't know. I mean, until after the election, we don't know how big a change. I don't know that anybody have we lost anybody in the House just from retirement? I don't know off the top of my head.
Sure, some people aren't running, or some people were defeated in primaries.
Well, that's true. We had people defeated in primaries. That's true. I have not done a close look at the money committees to see if any key people were defeated from those committees. I don't know. I need to double check that. All right. Well, it is 9:31. I am happy to stay on and answer any other questions or chat, brainstorm, whatever about different things. But I want to be respectful of your time. So I think our official coffee chat is over. And we thank you all so much for being with us. Anything else, Tony?
Hey, so Christie, as people are dropping off, this is Becky again. You set me on going down a rabbit hole when you were asking about dates for the 22 session. So of course I had to go try to project them out because that's not listed yet. Probably the money committees will report out on February the 13th. That's just from my looking back to what was in the 2020 session. Okay. With crossover being the week before, but they don't. Yeah. So anyway, that makes sense. Crossover would be that because it does it start early.
It's usually the week after crossover, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I know it's long session this year, but
right. But the session starts on the 12th of January, the second.
Oh, it's late. Okay.
Right. And so it looks like crossover will be on the I put at 8th of February, with the budget committees reporting out on the 13th.
Okay. Thank you, Becky.
Yeah, well, you put me on a challenge, and so there I was.
I love it.
Looking at my calendar, trying to figure it out. So it may be all wrong.
No, I love it. You're never wrong. I know that.
Becky, since David is asking that there's a lot of information on the website that you put in the link.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Do you know which one are the most important ones to review?
Well, David, I was going to give you the main click on it, but if you are on that website, you can look down and you can see the very first bullet in red says 2022 operating decision package submission instructions. And those are the ones that are due on the 1st of October. So on the 1st of October, they should be posting them as the decision briefs for each of the agencies, and it'll be called decision briefs for the most part. It's not there yet, but that's probably where it will be. So it'll be right in the middle of the page on DPB. And so there you have it. I mean, it's not the friendliest website, but again, it's really made for, sort of the technocrats in the executive branch and those of us who follow them. But yeah, you can read them out. And they come out in spreadsheets, but then they also have some pretty good narratives for the rationale for each of the asks. So it won't be till October the 1st.
But while I think it has a lot of sway, the governor certainly, at least recently, has not put in everything that is requested. And probably the biggest example was that in the Commerce and Trade request, and I guess it came originally from DHCD for the special session, there was a request for a pretty substantial deposit into the Housing Trust Fund, and absolutely none of that money ended up in the budget. So that will be something else that we're advocating for in the upcoming regular session, is a big deposit into the Housing Trust Fund.
All right. Well, we could keep looking at each other, but I don't think there's any, sounds like there's no other comments or questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a great day.
You too.